Welcome to The New Paradigm for Mankind, a weekly discussion between Lyndon LaRouche and his scientific associates, in which we investigate the true nature of the creative human mind and the ideas necessary for the progress of mankind.
Welcome to today's show. Today is September 25th, 2013. My name is Megan Beets, and I'm joined today by Benjamin Deniston of the LaRouche PEC Scientific Research Team and Mr. Lyndon LaRouche. So we're going to continue our discussion today of thermonuclear fusion. And in discussions last night with associates, Mr. LaRouche again emphasized the point that the species characteristic of mankind is the ability to think and act in the future and to envision the necessary future for mankind and act to bring that about. And as we've been discussing in recent weeks on this show, that future will not exist for mankind without a shift to a thermonuclear fusion platform, which, while it may not come about immediately, must begin today. So with that, I'll kick it over to Ben and see what you have to say.
Yeah, I wanted to put some stuff on the table, really following some of the things that, Lynn, you've raised in the show with the policy committee on Monday and on Friday on this question of, in your Friday webcast, on the question of fire. And just opening with this, I thought the way you posed it on Friday was very good about the beginning point when you see evidence of mankind using fire as marking a clear, fundamental distinction of man from beast. And as soon as you see that beginning where mankind is actually using fire in a way to change his relationship to the environment around him, can begin to make new tools, begin to cook his food, begin to use this for all types of purposes. And so right there you begin to get this distinction where you really can't say that mankind is defined biologically anymore. What defines mankind is no longer a biological definition. It's not in the body, it's not in the biology. It now becomes something different, something where the application of the power of mind, of creative mind, and wielding new principles and applying new principles to mankind's action now defines mankind as a unique creative species. It's not just another animal species. So this question of fire, of energy flux density, another way of putting it, is critical. And so from that standpoint, I kind of wanted to open up by just putting on the table a sketch of the U.S. history, the history of the United States in terms of energy flux density, in terms of fire. And to put us to the point of why we need fusion right away. Now, this is initial chart of the power per capita, or the energy flux density per capita. So if you take the history of the United States back to the founding of the country, this just takes us up to 1970. We'll see what happens after then in a minute. But if you take the history of the United States and you say per person, per capita, what's the rate of energy usage per capita? What's the power per capita? And then if you ask that question, and then you look at what is the source of that power? What are the different energy sources? You get a very clear and interesting transition of moving to what we've discussed as successive energy flux density platforms, or energy flux density sources, where you see the beginning history of the United States, the vast majority of the power source for the U.S. economy was based upon wood. It was a wood-burning society. And then only when you get the introduction of coal as a new source, which actually has a higher density of power per weight of the fuel and higher capabilities for higher temperatures and various things, you actually get an increase not just in the total power usage overall, but the power usage per capita, per person. Each person in the economy, with the move to a coal-based economic system, each person is more powerful. They are expressing a higher rate of energy usage per person. And you get a rough doubling of the energy flux density per capita when you move from a wood to a coal-based society. And similar with the motion to a petroleum and natural gas-based society, which came on after that, as you can see in the purple, you have another rough doubling of the energy flux density per capita. And so there's in the basement work, we're going to be doing a lot more illustrating the qualitative nature of this and beginning to show more details. But just to open it up today and put this on the table, this is the way we have to think about what mankind is and where mankind needs to go. So if you take these successions of transitions, it accumulates to one clear growth curve. You get the clear expression of mankind's continual growth, generation to generation, improvement in society, generation to generation, as expressed and measured by this increasing energy flux density per capita. Then you had the 1970s and the beginning of the 1960s and 1970s, following the effects of the assassination of Kennedy, and you had this stopping of the growth process. You had nuclear fission power, which came onto the scene. This expressed a huge potential for mankind. This expressed an ability to completely drive the economy to a whole new level, increase living standards, frankly, support the entire world in a new way. It was never allowed to happen. And you can see in the red here at the top, that is the amount of contribution that nuclear fission has been allowed to contribute to the U.S. economy. And if you take the overall curve, the whole process flatlines and begins to fall. So you're seeing a collapse function. So this is what's happened. This is where we're at today. This is what needed to happen. If we had continued this growth curve, this growth process, if we continued the natural process of human advance and utilized nuclear fission to its fullest capabilities, we would be somewhere up, again, a rough doubling of the energy flux density of the U.S. economy by today, probably earlier. And so what you see here with this gap is, this is, I think, a very important expression of our current economic breakdown. This gap in the growth process of the U.S. economy expresses the current collapse, your inability to get a job, your inability to support your population, your inability to sustain retirement programs and these types of things, to generally support the U.S. population. Your collapse is an expression of this failure to continue to grow. And in here you see what nuclear fission could have done, and you see the beginnings of where nuclear fusion, thermonuclear fusion, could have begun to come on. And that's what I want to just talk about a little bit, is the fact that it's been a political decision in the United States to not pursue thermonuclear fusion. All of this talk, there was some recent coverage in the BBC I saw of ITER. And ITER's making some progress and some people are excited about it, and so BBC covered this. And they end their coverage just with the same old pessimistic line where they say, this is all nice and interesting, but we're at least 40 years away, 50 years away, 60 years away from achieving thermonuclear power. And the line being thrown around generally is thermonuclear fusion is always 30 years away, because that's always what's said. They say in 1980, they said it's 30 years away. In 1990, they said it's 30 years away. Today, they say that's still 30 or more years away. That is a fraud, and it's a lie. And if you just look at the issue, it's very clear. So this is what we want to show here. Now in 1976, in the 1970s, there were significant developments in the area of controlled thermonuclear fusion. It became increasingly clear that this was a reality. This could work. These systems could be built. The breakthroughs could be made, and we could be moving to a thermonuclear fusion economy. So one of the things that was done was the first very thorough and comprehensive study on what it would take to commercialize thermonuclear fusion power. What would it take to get to a demonstration reactor is the general term demonstration reactor that's used. What would it take to build a fusion reaction system that could put electricity onto the power grid continuously? And it could be a design that could then be extrapolated to commercial utilization. It would be a design that could then be slightly improved upon to make a commercial reactor. It would basically be a first-generation demonstration reactor. What would it take to get there in terms of funding and investment? Now, there's more details in the whole report, but this is basically the middle path in terms of funding budgeting requirements to get there. This is a yearly annual investment budget requirements to get to the demonstration reactor by 1998.
What do you mean by the middle path?
Because for example, so this is a certain amount of funding requirements. If you gave higher funding, you could do it faster, basically. If you gave less funding, you could do it a little bit slower. So there's variations in the most optimistic and crash program proposed in this report was getting a demonstration reactor by 1990. So it's 8 years even earlier than this. He said if you want to put the money into it, we could build a series of reactors that would lead to a demonstration reactor by 1990. That could be done if we want to put that level of money into it. If we don't want to quite put that much into it, we could get there by 1998, which is this curve here. If we want to put a little bit less into it, we could get there by 2004. Now, for example, what is a very important project, the ITER project, which is currently being built, this was designed in the 80s. This could have been built in the 80s. On this type of path, this would have been built and operating by 1990. And now we're in 2013, and it's not going to be done until sometime in the 2020s. That's not because of technological problems. That's not because of scientific problems. That's been a political decision. We could have built ITER in the 1980s. We could have built a demonstration reactor in the 1990s. So this was clearly put on the table. It was studied in detail, and it was presented. Now, it was not followed. The funding was not given for this initial proposal. You can see in the green here the beginning of the showing of the actual funding that was provided up to 1980. Now, in 1980, the Congress passed and the President signed the Magnetic Fusion Engineering Act of 1980, which said we need to double the fusion budget by 1987, which you see here in the red. It said by 1990 we could build a reactor that will be the next step reactor, the next stage reactor, which would be somewhat similar to ITER, what's being built now. And by around 2000, we'll have a demonstration reactor. So that was passed legislation signed by the President, and they said, if we provide the funding, this is what we can do. And it was simply never funded. And this is what the funding has actually been since these developments. So all this talk about, and one other thing, and then also in the 1976 report, they also included a funding level which basically was called fusion never. If you basically just sustain the level of funding that was available in 1978, they said clearly that it'd be enough to kind of keep some programs going, but it would never be enough to make a breakthrough. It would never be enough to build the reactors you need. It would never be enough to build the demonstration reactor, so it's just not a serious funding level. If you're serious about making a breakthrough in fusion, we need to follow this blue path or something like it. If you keep us on a 1978 funding level, we probably won't reach fusion. You'll just trickle the programs along, but then breakthrough will never be made. So that was stated and understood clearly, that you need a certain level of investment to do this. And if we don't get that level of investment, it won't happen. We got less than that level of investment, less than the fusion never statement from the 1970s. And so who's surprised that it hasn't happened? So this line that fusion is always 30 years away is always 40 years away is a ridiculous fraud that people should challenge and take on. It's not a question of technological challenges that need to be overcome in 30 years. It's purely a question of, are we going to invest? Are we going to make this the intention of the United States government? We're going to make this the intention of collaboration with other governments. And are we going to put the resources needed into doing this? That was the question in the 1970s, and that's the question up through today. It's purely a political fight and a political decision to commit to do this. And as we've discussed and we have in our feature report, Nuclear NWAPA 21, this fusion program is what's needed to overcome this gap, this growth gap. We can't just pick up where we were in 1970. We can't just continue on where we are today. We've lost time. We've built in an attrition factor, which is huge. And we need to jump ahead. We need to leapfrog to a higher level in order to overcome 30, 40 years of collapse, of stagnation, of degeneration, which is what we're suffering from right now. And the only way you can do that is going to a higher level, which is fusion, a higher level of energy flux density. You know, we're going to need a lot of fission, nuclear fission systems right away. They're available, we have them, we're going to need to implement them en masse. But starting today, we need to have a commitment to making the fusion breakthrough as well, so we can bring that online as soon as possible. And so what we've put forward and have in this report and have as a policy proposal for our organization is making this the priority for an international effort. You know, I would say we should put on the table the idea of an international Manhattan Project, an international crash program. Get nations that want to grow, that want to progress, that are tired of this zero growth policy, that are tired of their populations being destroyed by this zero growth environmentalist policy. Bring them together and say, our objective, the United States, China, Russia, for example, we want to set as a top priority objective for our nations, making the breakthrough in fusion as quickly as possible. And we are willing to put in whatever investment, whatever resources, and it's not just money, scientific manpower, industrial capabilities that are needed to make this breakthrough. And that is the only way that we're going to really solve this economic crisis facing the globe right now, is taking an international commitment to develop this Pacific region of the planet, to use the natural alliances between the United States, China, Russia, Japan, that are available to us right now, and put up front the thermonuclear driver as what's the program that's going to provide the needed physical economic growth to actually address this crisis and put mankind forward onto a new level.
That is absolutely necessary, because without this, mankind will be finished. We've got two things. We have thermonuclear war potential. We don't have any thermonuclear fusion for society. Mm-hmm. And mankind is on the verge of extinction. When you take all the threats, all the problems that exist in society, the change in the solar system's conditions, all these other factors which are coming into place, and are now already important for us. If we're serious about doing anything, it's important for this purpose. And so what we really have to do is get, first of all, is to define exactly what we can do. Mm-hmm. And we do know something of what we can do, what measures could be taken. The biggest problem is Wall Street. Mm-hmm. Now, what happens? How do you suppress this progress? By increasing a hyperinflationary expansion, which means that you're investing in nothing. So the actual investment that is being made is less, constantly less, at an accelerating rate. So therefore, as long as we allow Wall Street and what it represents to exist, mankind is doomed. If we eliminate Wall Street, suddenly we begin to have the ability, the opening, to do what we have to do. So the trick is get rid of Wall Street. Sink Wall Street. Bankrupt it. You don't have to do anything else about it. Just bankrupt it. It's not worth anything anyway. And the proper appraisal of Wall Street says it's not worth anything. It's a fraud. If you look at the price, look at the shift in prices. I just looked at a haircut price. And I was, I had a shock effect. My God. A little thing like this, haircuts, men's haircuts, women's haircuts, they do all kinds of fancy things, which I don't even want to know about. But anyway, so the point is, if we collapse Wall Street, that will not solve the problem, but it will eliminate the problem, eliminate the obstacle. So the going to Glass-Steagall, renewal of Glass-Steagall, and Glass-Steagall was destroyed for this reason. People said it was for money reasons. Well, it wasn't really for money reason. Money was an instrument to bring about this breakdown. So therefore, we have to shut down Wall Street and shut down the equivalent of this kind of speculative system throughout the planet. Then, if we make the right decision, and we'll have the means to make the right decision, what's the right decision? What does it mean? It means putting people to work. And you have people who are lost the ability to work. They've lost the concepts. They've lost the mental development needed for the program. So you have to have a special program which is going to put people mentally into progress. You've got to see that people today in the United States are not competent by the standards of 20 years ago, 30 years ago. They're not competent anymore, especially since the change with the young Bush, well, actually the father Bush and the young Bush are the two factors which are most crucial. The prevention of the SDI program, similar kinds, that was a crucial breakdown. And we're having the same thing, the backing, cancellation of any serious kind of thermonuclear fusion program. All the same thing. So it's really their political decisions which have to be made. They themselves do not solve the problem. They eliminate the obstacle to solving the problem.
I think